Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Jarrett in for Lou Dobbs. Police in South Florida tonight vowing to make sure that justice is served after a gunman killed 17 people in the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history. Investigators now digging deep into the suspect's troubled past. Those who knew Nicholas Cruz describe him as a depressed loner, a fixation on violence and weapons. We'll have a full report from Parkland, Florida in moments. Also tonight, President Trump offering a message of unity and hope after the shooting, speaking directly to America's children.
I want you to know that you are never alone and you never will be. You have people who care about you, who love you, and who will do anything at all to protect you. If you need help, turn to a teacher, a family member, a local police officer, or a faith leader. Answer hate with love, answer cruelty with kindness.
We'll be taking up the president's leadership with former Trump aide Sebastian Gorka and the U.S. Senate's effort to pass an immigration bill today ending in spectacular failure. Senators rejecting all four bills that were put on the floor. We'll discuss where we go from here with the best political analysis in the business, Ed Rollins. Our top story, though, tonight, the search for answers after the Florida school shooting. We're learning the suspect, 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, showed plenty of warning signs before yesterday's tragedy. He bragged about shooting animals, got expelled from high school, and apparently posted on YouTube last year, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." And the FBI knew about it. Fox News correspondent Phil Keating is at the shooting scene in Parkland, Florida, has more.
Are you Nicholas Jacob Cruz?
Yes, ma'am.
19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, 5'7" and 131 pounds, faced a Florida magistrate this afternoon 24 hours after allegedly shooting and killing 17 boys, girls, and faculty at the high school that expelled him last year. Cruz is charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder and will remain held in Broward County custody.
Sir, are you going to be held no bond?
Unlike other mass shooters who took their own lives, investigators say Cruz tried to escape, putting down his assault rifle and blending in with fleeing students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Inside the high school, heavily armed SWAT teams, police, and deputies cleared out each classroom, one by one, rescuing terrified students and teachers who had barricaded themselves and hid in closets.
Put your phones away.
Today's not any easier than yesterday was. All the victims' families have been notified.
At Thursday morning's update, the FBI confirmed it had been alerted to the suspect 4 months ago from this YouTube poster who claimed someone with the same name as the suspect said, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter."
I knew that I couldn't just ignore that. So I screenshotted the comment, I sent it to the appropriate authorities.
The FBI conducted database reviews, checks, but was unable to further identify the person who actually made the comment.
The worst high school shooting in U.S. history, exceeding Columbine by 2 fatalities, began around 2:30 as school was starting to let out, when, according to the school superintendent, the suspect arrived in an Uber. According to investigators, he then shot and killed 3 people outside, then went inside, pulled a fire alarm, and while wearing a gas mask and carrying multiple magazines, as well as smoke grenades, started shooting at students and teachers as they flooded into the hallway. He then fled. An assisting Coconut Creek, Florida police officer spotted the suspect in a neighborhood about a mile away and arrested him.
I pulled my vehicle over immediately, engaged the suspect. He complied with my commands.
We offer these words, O God.
Students and families gathering today outside the school grounds, tributes and mementos for the victims. On the fence outside the police line now hang 17 crosses, 1 cross per victim, placed there by Chaplain Robert Osler of the city of Cape Coral.
They were worried about a pimple. Someone comes in and starts shooting. They shouldn't have to worry about being in a war zone.
And the crime scene inside the high school behind me remains enormous and very unfinished, but the sheriff did update us this afternoon, says 2,000 people so far have been interviewed, and that investigators are still analyzing reams of school surveillance video, trying to better picture a true timeline of terror of the suspect. Greg?
Phil Keating in Florida. Phil, thanks. President Trump today playing the role of comforter-in-chief for a nation in mourning, offering his condolences to the families of the victims in Parkland, Florida. Fox News correspondent Kevin Corke is at the White House tonight with the latest.
We mourn for all of those who lost their lives. We comfort the grieving and the wounded.
A day after a gunman killed at least 17 people at a Florida high school, President Trump pledged his administration would act.
We are committed to working with state and local leaders to help secure our schools and tackle the difficult issue of mental health.
Notably, the president did not mention the issue of gun control or new gun laws during his address to the nation. In his remarks today, Attorney General Jeff Sessions stayed on message, saying the Justice Department would partner with other federal agencies
to study the intersection of mental health and criminality and violence, and to identify how we can stop people before these heinous crimes occur.
But for a time Thursday, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin appeared to veer away from his administration's orthodoxy on the topic when he said this.
Personally, I think the gun violence, it's a tragedy what we've seen yesterday, and I'd urge Congress to look at these issues.
However, later his office clarified the remarks, saying there was no daylight between him and the president. The administration's focus on the possible mental state of the shooter rather than the weapon used in the attack is not new. After a Texas church shooting that claimed 26 lives, the president said this isn't a gun situation. After the Las Vegas shooter killed 58 and left nearly 900 others injured, the president called the shooter demented and a very sick individual. The Parkland shooting, just the latest in a string of deadly violence to strike America's school children, with more than 24 fatal active shooting incidents since Columbine in 1999. The administration's apparent emphasis on mental health rather than guns drew a sharp rebuke from Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal. His state was the site of the Sandy Hook massacre in 2012 that claimed 26, including 20 children.
Words of consolation, talk about mental health, are simply not enough. They must be followed by real action. The president has to lead or get out of the way.
I'd rather pass gun safety legislation than win the election, because people die from this.
The minority leader is also calling for expanded gun violence research to be conducted by and funded by the federal government. That is something, by the way, a great many Republicans oppose. Greg?
Kevin Corke of the White House. Kevin, thank you. Turning now to Capitol Hill, where senators today were looking to reach a deal on immigration, voting on a series of plans dealing with DACA, immigration, border security. Fox News chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel has been following all of the action on the Hill and has our report.
This is it, in a sense. Only plan that can become law, because the president said he would sign it.
Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley led the plan favored by the White House and leading Republicans. It met the president's 4 pillars, provide a 12-year path to citizenship for some 1.8 million so-called dreamers, authorize $25 billion for border security, more manpower, and a wall, limit family-based migration to the nuclear family, and phase out the visa lottery system.
The president's made clear, and I strongly agree, that any legislation must also treat the root causes and reform legal immigration. And it must also include common sense steps to ensure the safety of the American people.
President Trump shared his thoughts on Twitter this morning. While the Republicans and Democrats in Congress are working hard to come up with a solution to DACA, they should be strongly considering a system of merit-based immigration so that we will have the people ready, willing, and able to help all those companies moving into the USA. The Senate Democratic leader accused the president of meddling.
There's only one reason why the Senate will be unable to reach a bipartisan solution to DACA: President Trump.
There was also a bipartisan plan negotiated by 22 senators, which was attacked by the White House, including a veto threat, and the president warning it would be a total catastrophe. And the Department of Homeland Security warned it would be, quote, the end of immigration enforcement in America.
The release was so over the top and inflammatory, not factual, that I don't think it's going to be taken that seriously. We're the Senate of the United States. We're the Article I branch. We don't have to play Mother May I with anybody to make policy.
One of the architects of the plan vented his frustration with some of the president's inner circle.
Mr. President, listen to the American people and lead us in Congress, and all will turn out well. If you turn this agenda over to the most extreme people on this issue, you're going to fail like Obama and Bush.
The Senate Republican whip called this week dedicated to solving this issue a missed opportunity.
The president has generously offered a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million DACA recipients and DACA eligible people. So it's disappointing, but we're not going to give up because the deadline is still March the 5th and the clock is ticking.
Senate GOP leaders sound reluctant to burn more time on this issue. They're asking their Democrat colleagues to take a closer look at what they consider core elements of necessary reform. Greg?
Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Mike, thanks. We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us.
The Senate at an impasse in the immigration debate, with senators failing to reach a deal on DACA and border security. We'll take up where lawmakers go from here with Sebastian Gorka next. And President Trump consoling the nation following the horrifying tragedy at a Florida high school.
No child, no teacher should ever be in danger in an American school. I'm making plans to visit Parkland, to meet with families and local officials, and to continue coordinating the federal response.
We take up the response from the administration and lawmakers when we return.
Four Senate immigration measures going down in flames today, most notably the so-called Gang of 22 amendment that Trump tweeted earlier today, quote, the Schumer rounds call an immigration bill would be a total catastrophe. DHS says it would be the end of immigration enforcement in America, creates a giant amnesty, including for dangerous criminals, doesn't build a wall, expands chain migration, keeps the visa lottery, continues deadly catch-on and release, and bars enforcement even for future immigration. Voting for this amendment would be a vote against law enforcement, a vote for open borders. If Dems are actually serious about DACA, they should support the Grassley bill. Joining me now, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, former strategist to President Trump, now a Fox Business national security strategist. Dr. Gorka, always good to talk to you. Before we get to immigration, though, I do want to ask you about our top story, and that's Florida. The president today, in a very emotional and empathetic address to the nation, was really talking a good deal about his speech to the children there who've been so dramatically affected, traumatized by all of this. How did he do?
I think he completely hit the nail on the head, as he has after all of the recent tragedies that weren't terrorist attacks. So if you take, common criminals out of the equation that will always have access to guns, if you take terrorists out of the equation like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, who likewise will get guns or will use trucks or pressure cookers, the last group of people we have to protect our children from, and all American citizens, are the mentally unstable. And we have all the laws on the books. No new laws are going to stop mentally incapable people or unqualified people from getting access to guns. We need to actually implement those laws because they're not being done. I mean, look, in the 1970s saw a massive across the board reform of mental health in America, which meant basically after 72 hours, people are let back onto the streets. You can't institutionalize people. The system is broken in the health sector aspect of it. Has nothing to do with guns, and the president stressed as much in his comments.
You have to be adjudicated with mental health in order to stop you from getting a gun. Adjudication, as anybody who's ever experienced it knows, it's next to impossible. Let me move on to immigration. Are Democrats acting in bad faith?
Oh, Clearly. I mean, look at the last deal that the president offered. It went further on DACA specifically than the Democrats asked for. Almost 2 million people would have had a pathway to staying here in America. And what did the Dems do? They threw it back in the face of the White House, the GOP. They're not acting in good faith. They want to subvert, they want to sabotage as much as possible. And at the end of the day, it's about one thing for them. It's about access to new voters that they think can come onto the Democrat plantation. That's all that it's about.
Yeah. Finally, I do want to get your thoughts on the Democrat version of the Intel memo in the House Intelligence Committee. I have talked to somebody who saw it, and while he would not reveal the contents of it, he said it was basically long on opinion and short on substance. It was sloppy, poorly written, and it appeared to have deliberately contained classified information about sources and methods, knowing that the president couldn't possibly sign it. What do you make of it?
Look at what we know about the Schiff memo. It was hurriedly thrown together in the matter of a couple of days. Compare that to the Grassley memo, which went through the system for months. People don't realize the Grassley memo was written months ago and was vetted through the system to make sure it doesn't endanger any Americans. Likewise, the Nunes memo was built up over months and months of painstaking work. The president did the right thing. It's sloppy. It has sources and methods in it, but he's going to get the bad student to fix his own exam paper, which is the Democrat Party, Adam Schiff, and the people who knowingly put it together to embarrass the president. So great call by the commander-in-chief.
All right. Well, good luck getting Adam Schiff to do anything correctly. Sebastian Gorka, good to see you, as always.
Thanks, Joe.
Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you believe the Dems and the rhinos in the U.S. Senate have proven yet again they care more about politics than protecting our borders and the safety of American citizens? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. A reminder, follow Lou on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like him on Facebook. Follow him on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street, stocks closing higher for the fifth straight session. The Dow surging 307 points. The S&P up 33. The Nasdaq gaining 113. Volume of the big board, 3.7 billion shares. Stocks rebounding from last week's sharp losses. The Dow on track to actually have its best week since the 2016 presidential election, while the S&P and Nasdaq are on pace for the biggest weekly gains in 5 and 6 years, respectively. And a reminder, be sure to listen to Lou's reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Coming up next, President Trump today uniting a country reeling from the worst high school shooting in U.S. history.
We must also work together to create a culture in our country that embraces the dignity of life, that creates deep and meaningful human connections, and that turns classmates and colleagues into friends and neighbors.
We will take up the president's leadership in times of crisis with Ed Rollins. He'll be right here. Welcome back. Mitt Romney is expected to announce tomorrow that he's running for the U.S. Senate in the state of Utah. The former presidential candidate and Massachusetts governor was supposed to reveal his candidacy today. He postponed it to the Florida shooting. The head of Utah's Republican Party blasted Romney yesterday, comparing him to Hillary Clinton for being a carpetbagger running in a state he doesn't live in. It's not quite true. The party chair today says he had to apologize to Romney for the tone of those remarks. He believes he is qualified to run in Utah. What a difference 24 hours makes. And a telephone call. Gee. Joining us now, Ed Rollins, Great America PAC chairman, former Reagan political director, Fox News business contributor. Good to see you.
Thank you.
The president's speech today, I know you watched it. What did you think of it?
It's a very important role for the president to basically sort of step in here and tell the country and tell the people that are there that we care. We're trying to be helpful. He's not as touchy-feeling as a Reagan or someone like that, but he's certainly making the effort. I think it was important for him to go there. And I think ever since George W. Bush didn't go to Katrina, every president, when there's a time of crisis, now realizes I got to be on the scene somewhere.
Right. So that's a smart move.
It's a smart move, right?
But look, form and substance go together, as you and I were talking about during the break of that. Standing at a lectern in a big room.
No.
You know, I don't know who advised him on that, but that person ought to be fired. It ought to be a close-up, sitting down at a desk, maybe in the Oval Office.
Well, you know, you can do the hospitals. The Oval Office is always a very important place to do it.
Yeah.
And my sense is it just didn't work as good as it could have worked. It was important that he did it, and I think at the end of the day, you know, the problem with something like this, there's no short-term solution, and I think everybody's struggling with that.
Yeah. Over on Capitol Hill, meanwhile, the Democrats were either dithering or obstructing or both. And they wouldn't go along with the president, you know, extending an olive branch, basically giving Democrats everything they wanted on immigration. They wouldn't give him a single thing.
The president gave them a roadmap. He basically made a big concession to them last week. He said, you accept these terms. This is what I want. You have a bill. You take care of the DACA people. They won't do that. They basically... I don't know what they think they can do without the president's support. They certainly don't have enough votes to override a veto. And I think he's made it very clear. If I don't get this border security, if I don't get some changes to the other parts of the immigration bill, I'm not going to sign it. And I think he's right.
Have you ever heard anybody offer a legitimate and reasonable and understandable explanation for you know, the lottery system and chain migration? I haven't.
No, and I think he's come a long ways to try and be a leader of this, you know, make the Congress do the right thing. And I think to a certain extent he has every intention of standing tall. These are the promises he made in the course of the campaign, that he was going to make sure the border got secure. And I think to a certain extent they need to respect that. And if they don't, then tell them now, and we'll quit screwing around with it. It's just at the end of the day here, unless they give him what he wants, he's not going to give them what they need.
You know, what's astonishing is the U.S. Supreme Court said Congress has plenary power over immigration. Apparently, they don't want that power. Let me turn to Chief of Staff John Kelly. You know, a lot of people are talking about his imminent demise. Would that be a mistake?
I think it'd be a mistake right now. I think it's not. I don't think Kelly is quite as politically attuned as he should be, and we've seen that of late. But you're really in the midst of the campaign season. You got a new budget. You got a lot of things that need to happen. And I think another big change in the White House at this point in time would be disastrous. What I think he needs to do, though, is he needs to put a choke collar on some of these people that are basically bad-mouthing him and really straighten that place out. He did it once before for the president. He needs to do it for himself now and say, I'm going to be here. We're going to get through this elections. We're going to get some stuff done. And I think if they make a change at this point in time, it's chaotic.
Well, I give him great grades for just getting rid of Omarosa, for goodness sakes. Jeez.
Well, I'm not sure she's gotten rid of yet. I think she's still out there. But I think, you know, it's still as much disarray in that White House as without Bannon, without Priebus, all the rest of them they blamed earlier. And he needs to just straighten it out and just simply say, you know, these are the rules. These are the rules, and you're going to abide by the rules. I can't make rules for the president, but I can make rules for the people who work for me in the White House staff.
Omarosa is like a bad cold. You just can't shake her. Ed Rollins, good to see you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
We're coming right back. Stick around.
Petulant politics from the Dems. Now they're refusing to edit out national security secrets from their intelligence memo.
We're not going to make any revisions to it. The only question is what redactions will be made.
We take it up with Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. And more disgraceful behavior from top officials at the Justice Department. New evidence that Bruce Orr tried to cover up his links to the smear merchants at Fusion GPS. That and much more coming up.
Meditated murder as law enforcement continues to investigate why and how this guy was able to open fire on dozens of innocent people at his former high school. Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry is at the Broward Health North in Pompano Beach, where several of the victims are being treated, and has our report.
As the horror began playing out at Stoneman Douglas High School, the doctors at Broward Health North initiated a code green. An all-hands-on-deck disaster announcement they trained for just 6 months ago. Yet nothing fully prepared them for this.
We kept on getting phone calls. Are you ready to receive more patients? Are you ready to take this one? Are you ready to take that one? And always the answer was yes.
The doctors here believe there would have been far more deaths, but for the remarkable work of the emergency personnel who stopped the bleeding on so many wounds.
A couple minutes later, I started to realize, like, wow, this is actually happening. Like, this is really real life.
There was also the bravery of one of the first victims who was identified, Aaron Feis, an assistant football coach and security guard who used his own body as a human shield to prevent more children from being shot.
We had an athletic director, campus monitor, who responded immediately when there were signs of trouble in the school. Unfortunately, those two heroes gave their lives for our kids and probably helped prevent this from being a worse tragedy than it is today.
Students who survived the bloodshed also give great credit to a janitor who saved dozens of lives by realizing that when the shooter pulled a fire alarm, a large group of barricaded students were headed right at him.
As a result of their heroic actions, they saved probably all of our lives, about 40 of us.
The 19-year-old shooter was ordered held without bond after a brief hearing.
Are you Nicholas Jacob Cruz?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sir. You are charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder.
Meanwhile, people in this shattered Florida community tried to come together with an afternoon vigil to try to help ease the pain of so many, like this girl whose best friend was shot right next to her.
Unfortunately, she didn't make it.
If there is a tiny glimmer of hope amid the tragedy, it's that there are now only a handful of people still in the hospital, and only one of them is in critical condition. Greg?
Ed Henry in Florida. Ed, thanks very much. Joining me now, former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Carra. Commissioner, always great to talk to you.
Thank you,
You
sir.
have such a wealth of experience, so let's begin really the main focal point. There were warning signs. Could this have been prevented?
Personally, I think it should have. It could have. Nicholas Cruz sent a comment to a YouTuber back in September or October of last year. He wanted to be a professional school shooter.
Right.
The recipient of that comment contacted the FBI in Mississippi. They responded immediately, interviewed him, and then there was some sort of breakdown, investigative breakdown, where it was never followed up on. I heard the FBI say today that they couldn't figure out who the sender of that message was. The only way they couldn't find out is because they didn't look.
Right.
That's the bottom line. They could have subpoenaed Google.
Right.
They could have got the IP address. It would have led them to wherever he was, check with the school, look at his Facebook. They would have had him back in September or October.
I mean, honestly, you can get this done in a couple of hours by phone. I mean, that is probable cause. He's essentially saying, I'm going to be a murderer, a school shooter. So you contact a judge. You can do it by phone these days. A warrant is issued. You serve it on the social media operator, and they have to turn over an IP address. It can be done like that.
You know what, Greg? This is basic police work. Remember back in the 70s, we had Berkowitz, the Son of Sam killer.
Right.
They caught him on a parking summons.
Right.
On a parking summons on his car, on a street in the area where the last victim was. This stuff was standing out in broad daylight, and nobody looked at it.
Unlike many school shootings, Cruz did not turn a gun on himself. And he's already apparently confessed that he is the shooter. So I suppose something can be learned about his motives?
Learned about his motives, his thoughts, maybe we can use that in some way in the future. But I think most importantly, we can use it as a training tool.
Right.
A training tool for other schools in the future. DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, has a complete brochure for schools to look at on how they plan, prepare, focus, mock drills, tabletop exercises, all this stuff that they could be doing and should be doing, living in a post 9/11 world. But still, a lot of schools don't do it. They won't do it.
An argument can be made that schools need to train teachers and other personnel with firearms, allow them to have firearms. I'm not saying carry a weapon on your hip or your shoulder, but have it within easy access to protect students and teachers and personnel. What do you make of that?
You know what? I agree. But in the day and age in which we live in political correctness,
right.
I know children that have gone and were going on school trips whose fathers were cops and not allowed to go on the bus with them because they were armed. That's bizarre. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. And it's dangerous, to have that mentality. So, I think it'll be a long day before we have teachers armed or having access to weapons.
Do we also need to change the mental health standards for gaining access to a gun so that it's not just being adjudicated by a court as being mentally ill, which is next to impossible?
You know what, Greg? Common sense gun laws.
Right.
And that's common sense. Somebody has a mental illness problem, then they get flagged and they can't get access to a weapon, purchase, possess, carry. It shouldn't happen until they're cleared. In this case, if that was the case, this guy had a background investigation done. They should have known about the mental illness, but they didn't.
Yeah. Bernard Carrick, former NYPD commissioner. Always great to see you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Coming up next, House Intelligence Committee Dems playing politics. What's new? They're accused of intentionally revealing surveillance methods in their counter memo. We'll take it up with Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. He's here next.
If you or a loved one has been implanted with an IVC filter and the device failed, call the Rely On Group now.
Disturbing new details emerging on the demoted Department of Justice official Bruce Ohr. The Daily Caller reporting today that Ohr failed to disclose on ethics forms that his wife was being paid by Fusion GPS. That's the firm behind the discredited anti-Trump dossier. And of course, Hillary and the Democrats were paying GPS. Willfully falsifying government ethics forms can carry a penalty of jail time. Joining me now to talk about it, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. Tom, great to have you here. 18 U.S.C. 1001, if you knowingly and willfully lie to the government, it's a year behind bars, isn't it?
Yeah, Paul Manafort's facing charges for doing things like that, for filing false Foreign Agent Registration Act forms. Here you had a Justice Department official who's required by the regs and the law to disclose information about spousal income so his supervisors can figure out if there are conflicts of interest in his work. And in this case, he failed to disclose information about the fact that his spouse worked for a Clinton campaign vendor, Fusion GPS, compiling information, evidently, for the anti-Trump dossier that Bruce Ohr was using and laundering into the Justice Department.
And there's a picture of Bruce Ohr and his wife, Nellie Ohr. So just so our viewers understand, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats are paying Fusion GPS, which is paying Nellie Ohr, which means money's going into Bruce Ohr and Nellie Ohr's joint bank account. So he receives a financial benefit, and he then uses this Clinton paid-for dossier to damage Trump by tipping off the FBI, which launches a criminal investigation of Trump and associates and then spies on Trump associates. Do I have that about right?
Yeah, well, I think the dossier was being used widely in the Justice Department, but what's interesting about Ohr's involvement was he didn't disclose, at least on these forms, his connections to Fusion GPS. But even after the FBI got the cold feet about Steele because of his conduct and pretended to cut him off, Ohr continued to meet with him and Fusion GPS and again, launder the information back into the Justice Department. So a major issue. And, taking a further step back, this is another piece of evidence showing that the superstructure, as I call it, of the Russia collusion investigation into Donald Trump has been really irredeemably compromised and needs to be shut down. I don't know what other evidence you need. On top of the number 4 official at the Justice Department, his wife working for the Clinton gang, that was using this information to get FISA warrants to spy on the Trump team, and Lord knows what else. We think the dossier is just being used for FISA. I'm convinced it was used to justify the unmasking of General Flynn, Attorney General Sessions, and Donald Trump himself. From
the corruption at the FBI, he's the director, by the way. He cannot be trusted to fix it. 92% of you said yes. What's wrong with the other 8%? Come on, get on board here. A student at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School offering excellent perspective last night, notwithstanding the left-wing media's efforts to goad him into a conversation about gun control.
How, if you were a lawmaker, an adult in a decision-making position, how would you stop, do you think, the kind of thing that happened today?
Gun-wise, I don't think there's any way to prevent it. You outlaw guns, just creates higher demand for it. I think it has to do with mental health, though. If he's been expelled 3 different times from 3 different schools, I think he should be helped out.
Way to go, Brian Williams. 6 hours after the shooting, you're at it. Gun control. Joining me now to talk about it, Washington Times columnist, Fox Business contributor Tammy Bruce, radio talk show host for New York's WOR, Mark Simone. And President Obama getting into the act today, too, right, Tammy?
Yeah, he tweeted, as he normally does with some issues, and he did this throughout his presidency, a tweet that was a word salad, some platitudes. No original idea, no solutions, no specifics.
He never did anything about it.
It was a tweet about gun safety,
Right.
A reasonable gun safety. Well, we all, this is also insulting. Obviously, we all want this to end. We all want these solutions.
Right.
But this is, I don't think, helpful with the kind of politicizing that immediately people have gone to.
Right.
Of course, takes us off track when it comes to really finding a solution, because the solution, Greg, is not political at all. It's what that young man said. It's about mental health. It's about drug usage, both prescription and illegal, and dealing with issues of security.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, this is typical Barack Obama. All talk, no action.
Right.
Same thing with DACA. Why didn't he just get it done when he was there instead of that little letter that meant nothing, that had no legal basis?
Right.
The big problem here is these psychotropic drugs they put these kids on. It says right in the side effects could cause maniacal behavior, homicidal behavior. You'll never hear anybody in Congress mention this. They cannot do that. The drug companies are the biggest lobbyists in the world. They're not going to ever go after that. Also, the violence in entertainment. The entertainment companies own the news networks. You're not going to hear about it.
Oh, it's incredible. And the violent video games. Wow, we could spend a couple of hours just talking about that alone. I want to switch to immigration today. 4 bills turned down. Congress has plenary power to do something about it. I guess they don't want to exercise their own power.
No, they don't. And this is similar to what the Republicans did not do with Obamacare. They did not repeal and replace. Look, this is an entity. It's effectively management of a monster that now is only looking to maintain itself. They care about the nature of being able to at least have a population that serves it. It wants to grow. It wants to maintain its own power. So they're not in the business of solving social issues. They're in the issue of using social issues to make sure that government will always need to be needed. On the left, it was called rubbing salt into the wound. This is why you don't solve problems. You need them to be able to raise money and to be able to get votes.
Yeah, of course. And it's very transparent. What's confounding to Americans is here's the president giving the Democrats what they wanted on DACA. But it's a one-way street for the Dems.
Yeah, but it's not what they want. It's very important to them not to get DACA done so that it's an issue.
So they can weaponize it politically.
Exactly.
It's got to be an issue election day. I'm sorry, Democrats, they're making sure it doesn't get done.
So it's just a charade when they say, they want to protect dreamers.
And what no one planned on was a president who actually wants to solve problems, a president who actually cares about the American people just by his effort. The juxtaposition is clear about what Donald Trump wants versus what the swamp wants. It's brilliant, and the president wants to solve these problems.
You got 20 seconds.
I think they're just miscalculating. The voters aren't as dumb as we look.
Right.
I think they'll figure it out.
All right. Mark Simone, Tammy Bruce, good to see you both. Thanks very much. That's going to do it for us tonight. Thanks for joining us. By the way, Chris Farrell of Judicial Watch is among our guests tomorrow. Good night from New York. I'm Greg Jarrett in for Lou Dobbs. Thanks for being with us.